Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Dark Souls 2 beta playthrough. If all goes according to plan, you should be seeing this in the lead up to Dark Souls 2. There's intentionally 14 videos, which means it'll be one every day up until the release from the beginning of March. And this is the higher difficulty part of the game, which, as you can see, the damage is much higher. I don't think the enemies are reacting any more maliciously than they normally do, but this guy's giving me a real run for my money, and this is one enemy. If you're unlucky, you can get 5 of those things on you, so this was really when I started saying, yes, this game can be tough, and I'm happy for that. And we already know that there are several aspects of Dark Souls 2 that will allow you to increase the difficulty, you know, dynamically in the game, and I'm going to increase as much as I can on my first playthrough. The only thing that will change is if it's literally so ridiculously impossible that I won't be able to get anything out for the game except constant dying, which, you know, I know somebody would love that, but I'd like to show the game off if possible, because there's always time for challenge runs afterwards. But I'm still going to make my first encounter as brutal as I can. Like, I've got visions of not upgrading my HP, just going base HP for the full game. I don't know, I have no frame of reference. You know, the only reference I have is the first time I played Dark Souls, and if it's anything like that, it's going to be brutal, but I know it won't be because A, I've already played it, and B, I've played Souls games before, so people who have played Souls games play the next one better than they did the last one. You know, I went from Dark Souls to Demon Souls, and I found Demon Souls to be, you know, quite cruel and quite harsh, but I comfortably handled it in spite of that, so you know, there's a part of me that thinks that maybe Dark Souls 2 will become even more comfortable, or maybe it'll be the reverse, maybe it'll be absolutely hellish, and everything I've learned will just come back and bite me and prove to be my downfall, which I hope it does. Because I think that's my biggest problem with the you know, the annualized sequels, you know, the whoring of franchises. It's not the fact that it's the same thing all the time, it's that I've already learnt how to do that thing, and then in the next ones, I'm not learning anything new, you know, I'm not learning a new game, I'm learning the same game with a couple of added, really frivolous things. So, you know, my main love of improving and testing myself is just something that isn't there. Like, if you're playing Assassin's Creed for difficulty, you're playing the wrong game anyway, because that might as well just be fucking fall asleep and let it play itself. But I think that's my big problem with stuff like that, and I think that's one of the problems with Call of Duty, how I'm getting a little bit fatigued with it, even though I've lasted quite long. And I think it's because veterans are getting easier. You know, back when veteran used to mean, you know, eyes bleeding and hellish times, now it kind of just means, you know, sit behind this box and regenerate a little bit more than you normally would. And on Black Ops 2 it didn't even mean that, it just meant, you know, here's a gun that shoots through walls. Thank God Arnie didn't have this in Eraser, or it would have been only half a film. But what I'm doing here, if you're curious guys, is I'm running around the areas to fight things on the higher difficulty. I'm hoping it's going to bring the Red Phantoms back, but every time I checked it didn't, which is a shame. So you'll notice I've put a weapon in my offhand. Ah, that's what I'm doing. I'm messing about with the two-handing weapons on the left hand, and I'm messing about with the dual wielding a little bit, I think. I'm also trying to get used to moving while messing with the inventory, which it's so difficult to do when you're not aware of it. Like, on Dark Souls, I've done it for so long that it kind of just became second nature. This game, because I don't even know my way around the menu, I can't do it. It's beyond the power of my brain until I get that muscle memory. But you might notice that I'm missing some weapons that were in the beta. Apparently there was a rapier you could find. I know there's a giant axe you can find. I'm swapping back to the pursuer's sword now, which is kind of interesting because there's an enemy in this game called the Pursuer, which gets dropped off by a giant crow, which sounds absolutely amazing, and it's meant to be this nemesis, like, tough, super unbelievably dangerous enemy, and I want to kill it. I want to kill it the first time it lands, just to see if you can. You know, and it might be the equivalent of beating the Asylum Demon with the broken straight sword, which That isn't even fun for anyone who's done it. Ugh, so boring. I would rather do that game at Soul Level 1, New Game Plus 7, like with unupgraded weapons, than do that shit. Because that is boring as tits. Not to say that tits are boring. I'm using them the same way I use gay. The only difference is nobody gets offended when I call tits boring, but plenty of people get offended when I call something gay. The beautiful ironies of our language. I should probably start saying a word that means nothing and turn it into an insult to see if I can get people getting all defensive against it. But then I'd have to think of a word that, when reliably used, somehow still retains its humour, because it has to be funny. So, I think this is a mistake, because I thought you could use these in bulk, but maybe you can't. Maybe it's just the Covenant items. Maybe you've got to burn them at the bonfire, maybe it was turned off. So many questions, no answers, you've just got to live with it. But just have a look at this. I've got 25 life gems, and I've got 19 radiant life gems. If that doesn't tell you there was a little bit too much healing in the beta, I don't know what will. And I hear in the main game it's nowhere near as frivolous with them, which is a good thing. Because the life gems are going to almost replace the Estus, but at the same time, why would you ever do that? Because life gems are, you know, are for Christmas, while Estus is for life. Because it refills. So I'm interested to see the way that the healing works. And much like on the original Dark Souls, if you had heal, it was like having an Estus flask. So you had 2 Estus flasks that both, reset at the bonfire. But having something that you can just pick up can almost completely neutralise the need for Estus. It makes me wonder if it's even going to be viable. I'm really curious. But this is something I'm a little disappointed with. I personally think riposting on games is one of the most fun mechanics, because it's generally a test of skill and it's also a critical hit. And I love critical hitting things. I'm just a crit fiend. The only reason I don't play MMOs is because I don't have the finger or the lack of brain cells to want to click a mouse repeatedly for 7 hours and shit myself at the end. But I do quite enjoy the crits, and I can't understand why everyone isn't different, why there isn't 3 or 4 different animations and they kind of just randomly do one. And I know it's a lot more work for the developers, I know it's a lot more work for the animators, but I think that's what I would really push for if I was a game director, especially for Dark Souls. The things that I would push for would be a lot of that, especially on a sequel, because you're not even creating anything new, you're just kind of, adding to the lore. And that's not to diminish what they've done, because this is new geometry, it's a new world, it's a new engine. There's a lot of new here, guys, but it is a spiritual sequel. The name is a sequel, even though this is a different story that's probably just going to be quite tangibly linked. So I would definitely have focused on just the nuance, the subtleties. Because to me, that's the only part of Dark Souls that I think needed work. That and the Lord Souls, because the first half of Dark Souls is glorious, the second half is a rushed mess. And just imagine if the latter half with the Lord Souls was as polished and as well realised as the first half with the bells and Sens and Anor Londo. I think Dark Souls would have been almost a flawless game. But as it stands, there was restrictions, which meant that Izalith got filled with those stupid turd stone dragon things, which nobody likes fighting because they're pointless, and most people just run past. I just think those areas scream like they should have been used so much better than they were. Oh, we're in the catacombs and I have a torch. So there's me hitting him with the torch. There's me blocking with the torch. You'll notice it's not quite as all-powerful as they made it look in one of those demos. There's a parry. And there's a big riposte. Pots to smash. It's very dark. Not too sure how much of this is going to be visible when you watch it on YouTube, but it's dark. There's a dual-wielding, are they Falchions? I assume they are. And the problem I'm going to face here is, whenever there are skeletons in this place, there are often necromancers, which makes what I'm doing here kind of pointless, but I wanted to fight them because they were the only enemy I didn't really fight too much. Look at that. I love how cruel the AI is. That's him being revived even though I didn't kill him, technically. I have no idea what I just did then, but it looked awesome. That was like a 3-hit combo on an R2, maybe. Uh-oh, that was the lock-on failing me. And anybody wondering if you've not played it, the lock-on on this game is a relaxed lock-on. It's going to make things real interesting, and it's really going to separate those people who have to, you know, move analogs individually when they move around in games to the people who are quite comfortable with them. The amount of people who are going to struggle with this game just because they're so used to not having to aim, they're going to have a lot of difficulty. Oh, watch this. You might be wondering what I'm doing here except for looking like a fool. I'm trying to do an open hand parry, and I don't think there is one. Because as you just saw, I got relentlessly murdered by a skeleton I could have easily killed, and it looked like I was just standing there. So, lesson learned, I do not think you can parry with an open hand. So thank you for watching, and as always, you take care now.